Welcome to Comic Creators After Hours, everybody. I'm your host, president and publisher of After Hours Press, comic editor, writer, and now podcast host Darren Sanchez. Here at Comics After Hours, we go right to the talent and talk to some of the biggest names in the comic publishing industry. If you've ever wondered what it might be like to hang out with the creators after hours at San Diego Comic-Con or Chicago or New York Comic-Con, have a couple of drinks and talk comics, then this is the show for you. Today, we have one of the best-known editors in the business, a man who has worked at high levels at Wizard, Valiant, Marvel, DC, Aftershock, and now is the editor-in-chief at Madcave Studios. Let's welcome to the show my good friend, MIKE MARTS, everybody.
Darren.
Wow. How you doing, Mike?
Good to see you.
All right. Yeah, good to see you too, man. It's been a while. I hope everything's going well. For everybody who doesn't know, Mike and I have been friends for a long time, man. Probably since the mid '90s.
Since 90, I met you in 97.
Okay, so mid to late '90s when we were together at Wizard Entertainment, the beginning of our careers, man. So, and now Mike's father. He's a big time editor. He's done it all. Back then, we hadn't done anything.
Not enough. No. I can remember spending lunch hours going to a baseball field and just talking different story ideas that we had.
Oh yeah,
Wizard days.
Yeah. You know, we didn't achieve what we achieved by accident. I think we kind of we've always really been thinking about stories, what makes a good story. What we would do if we ever got a chance to put a team together or to write our own book. This podcast is a spinoff from After Hours Press, which I am the publisher and president and all that stuff. But Mike, you did a book with us called Necrotic.
Yes. Yeah, that was years ago.
On a living body. Yeah, you and Buddy. And, I think you guys were planning to republish that and add some stuff to it, weren't you? Like a Kickstarter or something not too long ago?
There were some plans. And it's funny, that book, Necrotic, was birthed from one of those Wizard lunch meetings where like you, me, and Buddy would just go to a softball field and just talk shop. And Buddy and I came up with the idea. I think originally Buddy had wanted to pitch a Living Mummy story to Marvel, and he did that. And because I think at the time they were reviving some of the horror stuff. They were doing like Werewolf by Night, and they were doing Son of Satan and Man Thing. And for whatever reason, I guess that horror resurgence was short-lived, and Buddy wasn't able to do the Living Mummy at Marvel, so he decided to kind of take it and workshop it himself. And I forget if he asked me to volunteer or like if I volunteered my services. I'm not sure how it happened, but we co-wrote that thing, and then we got Pat Quinn on as artist.
Pat Quinn. I was going to ask you, were you the one who knew Pat, or was that was he a friend of Buddy's, or how
funny? Like, God, I've been friends with Pat for so long now, I can't remember, but I do think it was a connection that Buddy had made. Buddy was, he was the online master at Wizard, and so he was always making connections here, there, and everywhere. In fact, like that one year that I was at Wizard, he introduced me to so many creators at the time who I'm not saying they weren't great at the time, but they hadn't hit their stride yet. He introduced me to Brian Michael Bendis. He introduced me to David Mack. I'm sure there's a few other people I'm forgetting, but yeah, Buddy was always connecting with new talent and existing talent, and I'm pretty sure he found Pat.
Nice. So you were only a Wizard 1 year?
Oh yeah, not even. I started in January of '97, and that was the year that Wizard World, the convention, first started. So I was there for the very first Wizard World, And then by September, I was gone.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I remember the day you left. I won't get into it, but I remember.
I've talked about it on a few other podcasts. Probably not in the direction that I think you want to go in, but yeah, it's funny. I've talked about how at the time, I'm not sure how old I was, 26 or something, and I was certain my career in comics was over. I would I would
I
never work in the industry
But you
again.
know what? Had that not happened, none of the shit that happened to you would have happened. So
Hundred
that was
hundred percent.
actually that was the beginning of your career, so
100%. It was such a um, I don't know, career builder or a confidence builder. It was a learning experience, and Fred Pierce was my direct supervisor at Wizard at the time, and I've been friends with him for years now, and several times in my career since then, I have gone back and I have thanked him for
for
the
firing
ed-
you, or
for the educational experience that Wizard was. And you know what? He totally gets it. He
yeah,
totally gets it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, Mike, what's the
Yeah.
next half issue you got coming? Nothing.
Well, what I learned pretty quickly, because I had been an assistant editor for a few years prior to my working at Wizard, and I knew I loved editing, and I thought I was pretty good at it. What I discovered when I got to Wizard is that I was not very good at promotions and publicity,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
was my spot there,
yeah.
which is fine. Which is fine.
Unfortunately,
The good thing about Wizard in just that year there are the connections I made and the people I met, whether it was in the Wizard office, because people there in the Wizard office I'm still friends with to this day. Some of them really good friends like yourself and Buddy and Brian Cunningham. Um, but beyond that, um, when you're working at Marvel or DC, you're working in a somewhat small bubble. The Iron Man office or the Batman office. So you're working with 15 or 20 different creators. When you get to Wizard and you're working on the promotions and publicity, you are in contact with 15 different companies and all the different creators that worked at those companies. So in just that short amount of time, like my address book, expanded, and I was able to, just make so many new contacts within the industry.
right. Well, when people ask, or whenever I get a chance, and I'm on speaking about how to get into the industry or break in, I tell people it's probably easier to break in than it is to stay in. But but one of the ways to have a long career is to not be an asshole. Because when people meet you, um, you want to make sure that not only are you professional, for just professional reasons, but for your own benefit, because you're going to be seeing these same people. You're going to want to work with these same people again. When In fact, anytime I get a tough assignment, I'll want to work with someone who I've already done like 6 projects with.
Right.
Um, if I had to go to Ricky Purdon and get a name of an artist or a writer, and I've never worked with them, and it was a big project, I would just tell them, you know what, I'll just find somebody. Not no knock on this person that you're suggesting, but I I need someone who's going to go the extra mile and not get upset if there's another correction, and
Right.
that's that's important, especially
No,
with it's your ass on the line, and I've ended up
exactly.
having to write some of those things myself because the writer quit because there was so many corrections from clients or things like that, and so that's just you learn your lesson, man.
Exactly. Don't be an asshole, like you say. Maintaining a certain reputation within the industry is essential to surviving in it and to, like you say, staying in it.
Right,
A lot of
right,
people can break in, and write a story here or draw a story there, but to thrive and survive in the industry, you've got to keep a good attitude about
right,
yourself. You think about the number of companies that both you and I have worked at, and who we've seen at those companies that have worked at companies previously. The industry is so small, and everyone talks. So if a creator or an editor or whoever develops a bad reputation out there in the industry as someone being difficult to work with, pain in the ass, complains too much, that gets around
Speaking of
so
which,
quickly.
let's put names on those. No, I'm kidding. Who's
Well,
the biggest pain in the ass you've ever worked with?
I'm not going to name names, but this happened the other day where there's a talent that we work with, and they are extremely talented, just gifted. But there's a tendency for them to go online and kind of gripe about things, and be pretty vocal about behind the scenes stuff, which
Yeah.
should really be something that's directed back to the company that you're working for, not being aired out as dirty laundry. And when you see stuff like that, the next time you get an idea from them or they want to work with you, and you have a choice between them and someone else, you may end up going with the other person that
No,
is
you
more
got it.
pleasant to work with.
Now, there's a time and place for going online and griping. If somebody owes you money, and maybe this is a way you might get it back, or if you've been laid off and you're trying to use your network to get another gig, as a editor, writer, whatever,
Yeah.
that's what it's there for. That's what you're supposed to do. Bad mouthing people, even when it's well deserved, rarely benefits you. So that's just something you discover. And if it wasn't for this podcast, I probably would hardly ever go online at all. So, so if you're worried about that with me, don't. But
Right.
no, but thanks for coming on the show. I don't want to talk about stuff, downer stuff. Let's talk about some fun stuff, man. Your most recent job is the editor-in-chief at Madcave Studios. So let's get right into the new stuff and what you're up to now. You came back from San Diego Comic-Con a few weeks ago, actually, and we were going to do this interview then, but some stuff came up, and hopefully everything's okay now. But at the show, Matt Cave made a big announcement or two, and so this is an opportunity for you to tell me.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Man Cave has been an amazing opportunity. It's funny I use the word amazing, but it's just been spectacular so far. I've almost been there 2 years,
He
and
was amazing and spectacular.
right, sensational as well. Uh, yeah, so it's San Diego. Our big announcement was that we are collaborating with Joe Quesada. He has a new venture called Amazing Comics, and Mad Cave is partnering with not only Amazing Comics but also Dupuis, a publisher over in Europe. And between the three companies, we're going to help Joe bring some of his new and best creative ideas to life. So that collaboration is just getting started right now. It's something we're extremely excited about. Joe was my boss at Marvel for 7 years in the early 2000s. It's rare that I've come across someone as creative as Joe in all my years. It just the ideas are endless, and when he has an idea, he executes it to perfection.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not just ideas; it's a rare talent at developing the ideas. He's got a very strong voice, a unique voice. I had the privilege of working with Joe on several things as well. Back at Valiant, I was there when he was drawing XO Zero, and we kind of came up together. We're about the same age, and he played third base on our softball team, so yeah, it was, and dude could hit too. I think his back is bad now, but he was a power hitter. But did mean
Joe was always good on the softball team. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So anything he does is going to be a hit. And we're just happy that he decided to take his ideas to a relatively young company like Madcave. But I believe he liked what he saw when he met the people at the company and felt it was the right place to kind of help bring his things to
Sure.
life.
Like I said, you
Um,
can work with people you trust, and he knows you, there's a comfort level there. Absolutely.
and then just recently, just last week, our other big announcement of the summer was the introduction of a new imprint called Nakama Press. And this is an imprint which will be dedicated to manga and to manhwa and just new ideas that fall into that space. Um, it's going to be a combination of new material, of popular manga that we're licensing from other countries. Um, so just like, a smorgasbord of great ideas. And we we talked about it last week online, and then we were at the New York Anime Expo over the weekend, and we had a panel there. The response was phenomenal. So it's just going to be a lot of fun creating a
Nice.
whole new imprint. Yeah.
So, Mad Cave. Then, when do these things? When are they coming out? When's Joe's first project hitting the stands, or your Nakama Press? When is that stuff going to hit the stores?
So Joe hasn't announced yet when his launch date for his project will be, but I know that's coming soon. So people should stay tuned for that. And Nakama Press, we're estimating that it will probably be around this time next year. Either midsummer, early fall, around then.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, for a lot of our audience who doesn't know exactly what an editor in chief does, um, what's a typical day like for superstar editor in chief Mike Martz at at Mad Cave? Like, what's an editor in chief responsible for?
So, I mean, if you boil it down to like what the editor job is, the editor job in comic books, it's almost like a baseball manager. You are helping to shepherd the team, whether it's the veteran superstars that have been around forever, or if it's the young rookies on the bench that are going to be the next big thing next year. Um, you're always working with the talent to get their best performance, to get the best ideas onto the page. A lot of coaching, a lot of mentoring, a lot of fact checking, a lot of nitty gritty, actual editing, um, helping manage the stories, um, discovering new talent.
Well, let me
Um,
get back to that then. Uh,
yeah,
Helping manage the stories. Editor in chief has changed a lot over the course of the years. Like I think if I asked that question of Jim Shooter, he might have a different answer than CB Cebulski. Um, as far as directing what the big crossovers are, how involved they are with the stories, or how hands off they are with the stories. Uh, what what's your take on editor in chief? Do you see the editor in chief as a visionary, or as someone who just lets everybody do their thing?
it's a combination of both, really. I mean, you have to have a vision that extends beyond that month or even that year. You have to be able to look ahead and see where your books, where your creators, where your imprints are all headed in the future. Um, so when we plan things out at Man Cave, we're not just planning out to the end of the year. We're planning out things to 2026 and beyond. There's a clear roadmap. So it's certainly one part visionary, and the other part is definitely trusting your team, whether it's the creators or it's the editors working for you. Now at Man Cave, I've got a team of 8 editors working for me, all supremely talented, and I'm interacting with them throughout the day, talking about different creator concerns, different book concerns, uh, problem solving, um, and they're all talented enough in their own right that I can trust them to do their thing. Um, but I'm there for them as support. I'm there for them as a coach, as a mentor, um, to help instruct, to help educate. Um, so going back to your original question, my typical days, it's a lot of interacting with my editors, seeing where their projects are at, what's in, what's not. If something's not in, why? And if there's a certain dilemma, if there's a certain problem that's prohibiting a project from being on time, let's figure out a solution. The best solution, cost wise, time wise. So it's a lot of problem solving. It's also um, I'll do a lot on the acquisition side. Like I have a weekly pitch meeting where we read and review and discuss 10 new pitches each week. And I help to manage that. I help to make sure if we do approve a project, it gets up and running through the contract process. So it's kind of like it's a mix of administrative and creative. But one of the big parts of my job at Madcave I take seriously is the educational aspect. Um, when I was back in Marvel, I had great editorial teachers. Mark Grunwald, legend editor, was there at the time, and he held a weekly assistant editor class that the stuff I learned then still stays with me today.
Yeah.
And I try to take a lot of that and impart it upon my staff, because in when you and I started in the business, there's like 3 or 4 companies at most, and most everyone came up through a certain system: the Marvel system, the DC system, the Valiant system. Um, these days people come from all over.
And they make
Different
up their own
com-
systems because they don't have someone to show them how it was done. And plus, with technology, things are changing anyway. So the way they do it might be better than the way that we've learned, but storytelling is still storytelling, um, and strong art is still strong art. So yeah, that my friend is not going to change. I think as far as that goes, but is how
right,
things get made that can change. But
exactly.
I've always believed in like a strong editor in chief is important. You need someone who is a visionary, someone who's the face of the team when it's time to do an interview, or announce something at a show. You take the mic and you put on your different hat and you get out there and talk to the fans. You do portfolio reviews, but there's always senior editors too who can step up, and so yeah, man, I think they got a good one for the job. So also you need to send me those pitch parameters because I'm sure Buddy and I would be happy to put together a badass pitch for you. So that's
Buddy's already beat you to the punch.
oh,
He's
Buddy's always he's a little quick on the release. That's that's our pal Buddy Scalera.
yeah.
So okay. Uh, Anything else about Mad Cave that you want to let our fans know? And a website somewhere where they can go check out the stuff.
Yeah, madcavestudios.com is the main website address. The important thing to know about Mad Cave is that we make comics for everyone. So a lot of people know us for our creator-owned books, regular comics, or even our licensed comics like Gotcha Man and Flash Gordon. But beyond the creator-owned and the licensed comics, we also have a imprint called Maverick, which is completely dedicated to the young adult space. In addition to that, we have a whole other company called Paper Cuts, which is our middle grade publisher and all ages publisher. And then added on to that, we have Nakama, which is our new manga imprint. So we are very intentionally diversifying our offerings and making sure that there's something on the shelf for everyone.
Well, no doubt you're in comic book stores, but is there any other distribution that fans could look to find your books at?
Yeah, I mean everything we do is in comic book stores. We are we're big in the direct market, and we're distributed by both Diamond and Lunar. And then we are distributed in the book market by Simon and Schuster, who has a very expansive reach, and they take care of all of our middle grade stuff, our young adult stuff, and they get it out to Amazon, to Barnes and Noble, to Indigo, to all the major book suppliers.
So they probably call for different formats than your standard 32-page comic book, I would guess. So
Yeah, almost everything we do in the middle grade and the YA space are OGNs, so they're not single issues. We'll do regular OGNs anywhere between 150 to 200 plus pages, depending
cool.
on the story, depending on the imprint.
All right. Well, very nice, and that's incredible that you're doing so many varied genres. I think that's important as far as succeeding in the industry. A lot of people might think that the superhero genre may be a little bit tired right now. Indie comics have always been a strong way to do alternative kind of things, westerns, kids books, sci-fi stories, just all kinds of things. And I think it must be kind of freeing to have all these different imprints and be able to just find a good story and know that you can do it. You guys aren't just like a house that does one thing, and so that's got to be really creatively interesting.
It is, yeah, because the superhero space, it's crowded, but it's crowded by only two publishers, and that's pretty much all that those two publishers do. Um, but if you think about a consumer, whether it's a reader or a viewer, a movie watcher, TV watcher, they're not just interested in the Marvel movies, the superhero movies. They want to watch other things on Netflix and Hulu
Sure.
and Amazon.
The Boys,
whether
The
it's
Walking Dead, House of the Dragon, just all kinds of things, and
everything, and everything falls into a different genre. And people might want crime one night or one week, and they might want fantasy the next, and horror the one after that. And at a publisher like us, we intentionally try to make sure that our offerings are spread out with different genres. We do very, very little in the superhero space, and that's intentional. We figure it's being done quite a bit elsewhere, but everything else we cover.
cool. All right. Well, let's jump to a different question. Since as an editor in chief, you're in on the business side as well as the creative side. So as a business question, well, I kind of ask this question of a couple of different people when I do these podcast interviews, and most recently we asked Jeff Johns. So I'll ask you as well, and see if you guys have similar answers. But where do you see the comic book industry going in the next 3 to 5 years?
I was talking to somebody about this the other day. During COVID and during the pandemic, the industry went through a lot of ups and downs, and it was very good to some retailers and some companies and some creators, and sometimes devastating to other people within the same space. And 4 years later, I think the industry as a whole is still recovering from that. There were retail outlets that previously were extremely successful and maybe lost their business during the pandemic. So there's still an adjustment going on, and the real recipe for that, the real solution to that, it's not going to be as simple as just one big thing happening. Uh, I feel it's going to take the combined efforts of publishers, of retailers, and probably most importantly, the distributors, um, to come together and figure out what's the best way we can get this excellent product out to the most people. so that we're not at a point where publishers are afraid to greenlight a new series because they don't think there's going to be enough sales, or
Hmm.
too afraid to take a risk on a new creator, for fear of a project not doing well. Um, as a whole, the industry really has to overcome that fear and feel confident in our abilities, our strengths. We've been through plenty of struggles before, and the industry's still here,
Yeah.
and stuff
Yeah.
is still selling, and there's still interest in it. But I think we have to get past this kind of roadblock that was created during the pandemic.
Okay. Um, well, I said it was Jeff Johns, but it was actually Mark Miller who I asked that question to, and
Okay.
and and his answer was basically that AI is going to kill us all anyway, that kind of thing. But but he thinks that what you're doing is basically what he said, and that's why I brought it up, is because he thinks that publishers need to be smart and diversify their stories to where they're not all just superhero books. Find the right audience for the books that people want to read. You guys kind of are saying the same things, with the exception of the joke about AI. But that leads into the next question: what are your thoughts on artificial intelligence, specifically as it pertains to comics?
So when AI kind of came into the spotlight, whenever it was, a year ago or a little over a year ago, Madcave was pretty quick to get out right in front of it and make a stance, and specifically say that we would not support or employ artists who used AI in the creation of comic books, and that we felt you're really robbing the comic creators of their creative freedoms and creative rights by using AI. So it's it's a really tricky situation. It's evolving day by day. Um, but until we get to a point where there's regulation in place, and that we have to get to a point where if someone goes to an AI prompt and says, you know, draw me a comic book that looks like Jim Lee, and the AI engine samples the work of Jim Lee, and Jim Lee is not compensated in any way for that creation.
Right.
Plus, and you know, it's not creation; it's appropriation. Um, that's where the real danger is. That's Jim Lee, who has spent decades honing and perfecting his career, um, and then someone can just come along and use his stuff to create something. Um, it's a much more advanced example of, like, Roy Lichtenstein using comic art back in the days to create his pop art. Um, but it's a similar type of thing, but it's just magnified, and the dangers there are intensified. So we have to get to a point somewhere where companies like Meta, um, and other companies that use AI engines take some type of stance for creators' rights. And Jim Lee I use as an example, but Jim is someone who's at the top of the game. What about all of those people trying to break in, people who are just struggling to make rent, who are just giving every hour of their day to the craft, and something of theirs gets appropriated? um, that's even worse.
Right. Or they can't really compete with the other guy who's just coming up, who already draws like Jim Lee because he's using AI to help him.
At the rate it's growing, what happens a year or two from now where that type of stuff, those tells are invisible. And you might look at a comic page and it may look exactly like one that a real comic artist created. And that's the danger that I don't want us to get to. Um,
Yeah.
the other dangerous area is that sometimes there may be artists who are supremely talented who maybe paint, um, or use a computer, Photoshop in in creating their artwork, and some people might point at it and say, "That's AI, that's AI," and maybe the artist isn't.
Right. Like
You go
Scott or Alex Ross or somebody like that.
exactly. Someone like Art Germ.
Mhm.
I mean, we all know Art Germ and we know his stuff and everything
Yeah.
and love it. But if he were just to show up on the scene today, there could be some people who are like pointing and say, no, no, that's you know. So there are real dangers um, within the AI space uh, these days, and I know you know um, in the emails leading up to this podcast, you brought up Colin Kaepernick. Colin, who uh, I respected over the past bunch of years with the different stances he had taken for civil liberties and civil rights.
Mhm.
And it's disappointing that someone who a few years ago was so front and center in terms of civil liberties isn't applying that same thought and stance and ideology for creative rights and creative liberties. Um, and I don't think he's ill intentioned. Um, I'm sure his intentions are in the right place. I just doubt he's had the right education in this area, or someone who isn't $1 million backer to come up to him and explain to him, hey, this is why what you're doing is inherently dangerous and potentially wrong.
Right.
Um,
And there may also
but
be a
that's
backlash
speculation on my part. Right.
that the finished product may not sell because of the stigma attached to stealing people's art, so
Right. And for the rest of us in the comic industry, that's a best case scenario that, you know, whatever, this company is that he's created, it launches and falls flat on its face and finds no audience and then goes away.
yeah. I mean, I
Um,
haven't seen an article about it since they announced that, so I don't know.
no,
Maybe he already did change his mind. Who knows? Um,
that would be great.
okay, we're going to play a quick game.
Yeah.
It's 15 rapid fire questions. I've written them down here, so if it looks like I'm reading, it's because I am. I can't memorize 15 questions.
Okay.
So,
Now
so
you're going to be rapid fire asking. Do you need rapid fire answering?
no,
Or
well,
quick?
you're allowed to think. You're allowed to think about it, but and
Right.
and and maybe we'll even get into a conversation if the answer is good.
Right.
Okay, so okay, question number one: variant covers and ratio variants. Is it good or bad for the industry?
Good. Um, I think in moderation, variance and ratio variance are a good thing. Um, they can really help out some stores make their sales in a specific week. It's a great tool that publishers and creators can give to retailers. Um, certain fans absolutely love it. So you're giving the readers and the fans something to chase, something to want. It drives them into the stores. It makes them want to collect. It makes things hard to find, which is part of the thrill of the hunt of collecting. And maybe the most important thing, it gives extra work to our creative base. So, before variants, there was less cover work. now that we have variant covers, there's more cover work.
Sure.
So I think it's a good thing, but the flip side, of course, is that you will see certain publishers abuse it sometimes to the point of ad nauseum, and that's where it gets unfair. That's where it gets to the point where you're just doing this to inflate sales numbers. It's beyond giving the retailer an incentive, something cool to play with, and to maybe it makes some extra bucks. And now you're really doing it just to inflate the sales numbers. And at that point, it becomes ridiculous. So, do I think it's good? I do. I think it's good in moderation.
Yeah. Okay. I could agree with that. I've heard a lot of different arguments, but I agree with when it gets crazy. As a comic fan, it makes me not even want to buy the comic because you feel like you don't know if you're going to get the cover that's going to go up in value, or you got the worthless one, or what. I mean, you just get the one you like, obviously, but sometimes you also want the one that has some spec appeal,
Right.
and when they do that, it's like you don't even have that issue anymore. You can't say, "Oh, I got it," because you don't. You have one of them, but that's not the same thing. All right. CGC grading and slabbing books in general. Yay or nay?
Yay. Yay. 100%. I listen. There are all different types of collectors, or I should say, all different types of readers. There are the people who read a comic, read it a million times, just love to go through the pages, and then they put it down, and it's in a pile somewhere. There are others who read it and collect it. It's part of a collection. It's a badge of honor. It's something to be proud of. I have all the issues of Amazing Spider-Man. I have this collection. And there are other people who see it not only as something fun to do, but also maybe as a little investment. Is there anything wrong in that? I don't think so. I think we have all different types of readers, all different types of consumers. And if slabbing something and getting a grade on it, kind of increases the value of something that you spent your money on and you worked hard to do, creating a comic collection is hard. It's not like you
Yeah.
just like wake up and just can acquire everything. So, if you want to take your collection and improve it, polish it, make it a little bit better, I say go for it. Go for it.
Yeah.
It's not going to be for everyone, you know?
I feel it's like when you go to Vegas, if you want to play at the expensive tables or if you want to play at the inexpensive tables, it's still poker or it's still whatever. If you got more money to burn, then you can get in on the bigger games, and that's what this is. There's some people who talk about the fairness of it all, how 9.8 used to be the highest you can get. Now they're giving out a lot more 9.9s, or if I got something graded, let's say it was a 9.6, and I'm sending it in to get reslabbed because the slab is old or it got scratched or something. Then it comes back and it's a shittier grade. Stuff like that happens all the time. And
Right.
so there's little things within the habit or the hobby. It's actually both.
Right.
That that make it frustrating, I think, at times. And then there's the fact that slabs sometimes don't sell because Amazing Spider-Man 300. If you have it slabbed, it might be a $500 purchase. Whereas if it's raw, it's not as huge a commitment. So there's pluses and minuses to it, I guess, just like the variant covers. Okay, next question. What's your favorite all-time comic book story arc?
Well, I know it's probably a popular one, but it would be tough not to say the Dark Phoenix saga. X-Men, no surprise, was my big thing. I
Okay.
loved reading them growing up. It was what I started reading when I was growing up. It's
How old
what
were you
I
when that came out? That storyline.
it came out before I started reading comics. So that came out in um 77?
4?
70. So Giant Size X-Men #1 was 75, and the Dark Phoenix saga started roughly 36 issues. It was 3 years later, so it was like around 78.
Okay.
So I didn't start reading until 1980. But being an X-Men fan, as soon as you started collecting, everyone was talking about the Dark Phoenix saga. So I went back
Sure.
and got those issues as soon as I could, and
But that was also one of the first things you read. So to you, that's how comics are supposed to be, I think, and I think that is a popular answer.
Yeah, it was just a great combination. Just fantastic writing from Claremont. Just awesome illustration by Byrne, and just the mix of characters at the time. To me, that's the perfect X-Men cast. And and so many big things happen within that arc.
Okay. What's your favorite arc that you've edited?
Oh, man, there's a lot. I think to a time like when things were really firing on all cylinders. I spent about 7 or 8 years at DC Comics as the Batman editor, and when Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely were doing Batman and Robin, that run was wonderful. Probably one of my favorite things I've worked on. Um, and the issues with Frank were great. And then shortly afterwards, I think we had like maybe Andy Clark and Chris Burnham, and the stories were just still incredible. Yeah, I mean that and also probably Astonishing X-Men from Joss Whedon and John Cassaday.
Okay,
first
well, I'm
year or
going to
so.
go off book with the question.
Hmm.
What would you say is the biggest difference between working at DC and working at Marvel?
Well,
Keep it clean.
I will. Keep in mind, my time at Marvel and my time at DC, both companies are very different at today, 2024. So whatever I say now may not apply to how
So,
the companies are.
as
But
you saw it, what was the biggest difference?
as I saw it, I mean, listen, there are fantastic things about both companies. Marvel certainly has a deeper bench of characters. DC has some big ones. It's hard to top Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman.
Sure.
After that, you've got Green Lantern and Flash, and then after that, the bench gets much lower.
After that, you need to
Right?
be Brian Cunningham to know all the rest of the characters. So yeah,
Exactly. And that was always kind of a struggle when new big talent were coming in to DC, whether it was, you know, um, David Finch or Andy Kubert or Brian Azzarello or whoever. You automatically want to put them on either Batman or Superman, right?
Sure.
It's much different at Marvel. Marvel has the X-Men, has the Avengers, it has Hulk, has Iron Man. Like there are a number of different cool places that big creators can go and be happy and get sales that reflect the amount of energy they're putting into it.
Right.
But yeah, that's one area where I think Marvel has the advantage. But for me, Marvel was always kind of getting a book out, you know, 5 minutes before it was due at the printer. There was a
Yeah.
lot of crazy glue, a lot of duct tape, a lot of triage at the last second, and that's just kind of how the place ran, for years. And that's not to say there wasn't planning or charts or
That's how runaway trains tend to go off the rails, by the way.
but it was kind of the culture. DC got made fun of for a long time, like, oh, they're very stuffy. They're very corporate, systematic. There's a form for everything. And listen, all that's true. Uh, when I got to DC, there was a form for everything, and there was a person who worked there, like someone responsible for this form and that form and everything. And it was more corporate and more structured and everything. But for me, my personality and the way I like to make comics, that was a system that I gravitated towards. And at least for me, as an editor, working within that system um, was better.
Okay. All right. Now I have one here. I'm going to show it an image.
Yeah. Yep.
This is almost like looking through an old yearbook.
Yep.
This is just right off my like Facebook page because there's so many like stuff from conventions and us playing football or softball or whatever it was. Um, so that is just to set the flavor for the question. Is Who's the best flag football quarterback you've ever played with?
Well, his last name was definitely Sanchez. Now, whether it was
brother, right?
whether it was Vinny or Darren, well, I would have to say it was you. And I'm not just saying that because it's your podcast, but it would be hard to count the amount of touchdowns where you connected to me on some fly down the field.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Seeing these pictures is great. Just so maybe you've talked about in other podcasts, but for the audience, in the late '90s and early 2000s, there was a conglomerate of people who worked at Wizard, Marvel. I don't think we had any DC guys, but definitely Marvel, Wizard, Valiant, um, and the occasional freelancer too. Because I know like Jim Calafuria was a big
Yeah.
recurring person.
Yeah. Chris
Um,
Eliopoulos would pop
right,
up.
Chris Eliopoulos. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, and we would get together. I think every other Saturday morning on a field somewhere in either Rockland County, New York, or Bergen County, New Jersey, and
Right. Right.
yeah, and
Because
yeah, this
Buddy
was
insisted that we had to alternate. Yes, yeah. I mean, we had Joe Quesada and Billy Tucci came to one game. I remember. We had Juan Doe played with us.
yep,
Um, we had Mark Powers, Dan Carr from Marvel,
yep. Mark
um,
Morales, um,
Hollywood, Yancey Labatt,
yep.
um, uh,
Oh yeah, I see Jared Osborne, Matt
Mi-
Ryan,
Mike Raish.
Mike Rach, yep, yep.
Yeah, man.
Ian Feller,
Yeah, Ian. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the most fun part was when we would go to Canada to play against the Quebecois team. When I went to do press checks up in Canada, when comic books would go on press, the infamous Turok #1, stuff like that. Quebecois, I found out that they had a flag football league, and so I went with my sales rep, guy named Mark Lucier, and I went to go watch them play. And like a typical ugly American, I was talking shit the whole time, and telling them that they play like a bunch of Canadians, so it was fun. It was all in good fun, but we ended up getting challenged, and so I put a team together. And in case you guys aren't aware, generally people in the comic book industry are not the best athletes. Where, which my brother was quick to tell me, but we managed to get together some guys who could run, catch, and throw, and we played them for like 8 years, and in the end we won 4 and they won 4, and it was a great time. So
oh,
anyhow,
definitely.
I just wanted to be able to talk about that and give that a
Thanks,
little
man.
closure. Um,
Yeah, I love seeing those pictures.
all right, we're running out of time, so I'll try and get through these real quick.
Yeah.
Um, Most memorable moment or most starstruck that you've ever been at a comic convention?
So it was actually for a fantasy illustrator, Larry Elmore, who did a lot of Dungeons and Dragons paintings back in the day, and he kind of famously did all the cover illustrations for the early Dragonlance novels. To me, he was just like, a god. And I remember when I saw him at San Diego one year, I went up to the table and then I just like I got caught. I couldn't speak. I couldn't, I couldn't even introduce myself. And my significant other at the time kind of pushed me and like was like, go,
Yeah,
talk
yeah.
to him. And yeah, so that was probably the biggest one for me.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I remember in Chicago one year I met Brian Bendis, and Buddy introduced me just like he did you. And
Hmm.
at the time, I was writing something called Celestial Alliance,
Hmm.
and Buddy said, "Tell him about Celestials." And so it, it's a story about a Army helicopter pilot, which is kind of like a personal story for me because I used
Right.
to be an Army helicopter pilot. And so when Brian said, "So tell me about your comic book," I said, "Well, it's personal." And he said, "Oh, sorry." And that was it. And that was too it was too perfect that I just walked away.
Uh-huh.
So I really screwed that one up, and I'm sure
Oh man.
Brian doesn't remember that, but Buddy laughed his ass off. So
Right.
that's I mean, I've got to meet guys. You probably met Stan Lee and stuff, and that was a big moment.
Yes.
I
Yeah. Yes. Stan Lee was big. Chuck D from Public Enemy was big. Um, um, Tiki Barber was a big one. Um,
yeah, I got to
yeah.
meet The Weekend. I did the comic for him. I actually went to his house a couple of times in LA, or if you
Oh,
want to call
nice.
it a house, it was it was a mansion. All right,
Oh,
next question. You have a reputation in the rough and tumble comic book industry as a true tough guy. Have you ever been or almost been in a bar fight or pool hall fight?
I was almost in one with you, and in Philadelphia, we went to a Sixers game. See the Sixers, I think, play the Suns, and Barkley was on
Uh,
the Suns.
they played the Rockets. That's
Oh,
Barkley
the
was
Rockets.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah. So Barkley was on the Rockets. Um, and it was me, you, your father, and somebody else.
Ian
Oh,
Feller.
Ian Feller. Right. Yeah. And yeah, we went to the hotel bar or something afterwards, and yeah, we are playing video games and stuff like that. And I guess it was like closing time or whatever, and we were just trying to throw up a few more baskets into those like like basketball machines, and the bouncer didn't like that we were not leaving at that exact second, and got rough with me and grabbed me by the shoulders and was like pulling me, pushing me to get out and everything. And your dad, God bless him, he stepped in and was kind of like establish peace very quickly. It was like leave these boys alone, because
Yeah,
the bouncer was like twice the size of me.
yeah. Well, twice the
Yeah.
size of my dad too, but my dad did. But
Right,
yeah,
right.
uh, yeah. He used to ask me after that, what was the name of that friend who I saved from getting his ass kicked in Philly?
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah, he loved that story. Um,
yeah, yeah,
so okay, let's see. A couple more quick ones here.
yes.
Do you have a comic book collection?
I do, I do. It's about
Uh, how many?
10,000 strong.
How many thousand?
10,000.
10,000. Wow. Your wife must hate it.
Well, she only hated it when we moved into this house, because before that we didn't live together. And one of the good things about this house is that there is a vault on the bottom floor, just like this storage room that is the perfect temperature, and it's got a
Oh
lot
wow.
of space, and I've got all my boxes in
Is
there.
it is it a wine cellar that you've turned into a comic book room?
No, I'm going to try to do the opposite. I'm going to try to turn the comic vault into a wine cellar.
Okay. And what is your prized possession of your collection?
Two, Giant Size X Men #1 and Uncanny X Men '94. And then close behind that, I have a few others I like. Incredible Hulk 102, which was the first Incredible Hulk with advanced numbering, and Thor 126 which was the first Thor after Journey into Mystery.
Okay, cool. Well, I just wanted to ask that because I know anyone who collects comics loves to freaking talk about it. So,
Oh yeah, I could go on and on about other prized possessions.
yeah, I mean, mine is like probably about 8,000, but I also have I got a ton of like Star Wars figures and all kinds of shit. And the fun part, since we're in the industry, is that probably 90% of it we got free.
Right, we acquired. Exactly.
So,
I
know that people hate that, but it's the truth. Okay, let's see a few more. If you didn't have a career in comic books, what have you ended up doing instead? What would you have ended up doing?
If I stayed in a similar type thing, same creative motions and everything, I really could see myself working like on a TV show, whether it was like producing or show running or writing TV episodes. It's similar, I think, to the creation of comic books in that, it would feel satisfying, the same amount of satisfaction.
Oh yeah,
if it was something completely different, I would just love to like carpentry, like building stuff with wood.
I like doing that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd probably would be like a police lieutenant or something by now, or I would have stayed flying helicopters. So, if you had to write a 12-issue run on any Marvel or DC character, which one would best fit your writing style?
I'd go to the X-Men. It's what made me want to get into the comics industry and work in the comics industry.
So are you good with like buddy banter and mixing humor with action and that sort of thing?
I would say good character development and kind of dealing with a large cast of characters, and melodrama. So, that's.
I know you're all about melodrama.
That's a lot of what the X-Men is.
Is there a project or projects that you are most proud of from your personal career in comics?
A few of them I already mentioned, like my run with Grant on Batman, whether it was Batman itself or Batman and Robin or Batman Incorporated, that's a big thing. Doing Origin with Andy Kubert and Paul Jenkins was a big thing. Astonishing X-Men with Joss Whedon and John Cassaday, and then my X-Men run with Grant, and there were so many different artists that worked on that, Phil Jimenez and Chris Bachalo, and so
and Necrotic with Buddy Scalera.
Yeah, let's not forget.
And finally, where can your fans and my viewers find you online?
MadcaveStudios.com is probably the best place to go for anything that I'm working on. If you feel like checking out my Instagram, which I only update like a few times per year, it's Mike J Marts, and I think I have the same handle on Twitter as well. But mostly MadcaveStudios.com is where people can see what we're working on.
And the last question: all of my guests get complimentary After Hours Press swag. So would you like one of these stunning t-shirts, or perhaps one of these coffee mugs?
I will take the coffee mug.
Very nice. Good choice. That way you don't have to worry about the fit or anything like that. So just later on, text me your address or something, and I'll get one off to you.
You got it.
Yeah, man. It was great talking to you, and hopefully, we can get together maybe at New York Comic Con or something, or maybe at Buddy's house. Or, I don't know, who knows? But or we could do this again. And if you ever have a project that you wanna have one of your guys, like maybe Joe Q, to talk about his book, he could bring his creative team on, and we could just have a little fun like this too. Point them my way.